This is the Refinery featuring Free Radical Network, the Party of Choice, and the Conservative Union here on Vigilant Liberty Radio.
All right. Hey, everybody. Good evening. It's Tuesday, January 20th, 2015, and this is The Refinery, the place where grassroots organizations come together to explore the best ways to make conservative messaging work, to reach and influence more people. We are live every Tuesday at 8:30 Central on therefineryshow.com. Go there anytime to watch, listen, and subscribe to the show via YouTube, Vigilant Liberty Radio, iTunes, Stitcher, or TuneIn. There are also plenty of options for you to provide us feedback as well. We want to hear from you, particularly in the chat room right now at therefineryshow.com. We already have Prue in there and some more folks. T we've got in there too, because you know what, we need to, given that tonight is the State of the Union. Yes, we are all aware that it's the State of the Union going on, but since we don't want to risk liver damage, we have decided to do The Refinery instead. Tonight I am here with Felicia Cravens from Free Radical Network. I'm also a Free Radical Network, JD Broughton. We have Leslie from the Conservative Union, and Corey and Andy from the Party of Choice. So tonight we are going to talk a little bit of the State of the Union, but before we get into that, since everybody's already had their fill for right now, we want to kick off the show with some discussion of elitism and anti-intellectualism and some big ism words that have been thrown around at conservatives for a while. This was actually brought up to us from Taylor from Vigilant Liberty Radio, iDesert Blog on Twitter. He brought this to our attention over the past week, so we could check that out. From Matt K. Lewis over at his website, he has a podcast which was really interesting to talk about this with a former Bush White House guy, and they had this long discussion about what was valued in the conservative movement, and is it really as anti-intellectual as the left has said? It was a really interesting discussion. Fishy, let's see if you can come in here. Fishy, you listened to this. I did as well. What are some thoughts that you had from it?
Well, I was looking through the thread that we were talking about what we would talk about for the show tonight, and one of the things that just kept popping up was that theme of elitism. And what the conversation was between Matt and Peter Weiner was whether or not conservatives were more properly labeled anti-elitist or anti-intellectual, and that there was maybe some camps of both perhaps within the conservative movement. The anti-elitist strain are the people who look at what, say, Harvard professors have wrought and decided that it wasn't as good as they thought it was. They've seen the chaos that so much of this academia, the intellectualist, the institutional left has done with their planning, and they're hoping to control everything and plan your life for you and order people where they should go, what they should do, what they should eat, how they should work, how many hours, all this sort of thing. That the elitists have got it wrong, and that there's a proper strain in the conservative movement against that. And then they contrasted that with this anti-intellectual strain, they called it. And this was, I guess, most what is the word I'm looking for? I guess captured the most by figures such as Sarah Palin. They used her as an example. Someone who seemed to be very proudly anti-intellectual in their estimation. Well, I didn't know that I necessarily agreed with that. That Sarah Palin might use phrases in a simple manner of delivery that can oversimplify some concepts. I don't think that she's an anti-intellectual as much as an anti-elitist, but they were going with that theme of there being an anti-intellectual strain. And I think it was evidenced in part, they thought, by some of the people in the Tea Party. Now, that's not to say that the Tea Party hasn't been thoughtless on occasion with how they do their messaging and how they might approach an issue, or how there might have been arguments over tactics and strategy to get to the goals that everyone shares on the right, or everyone, we think, pretty much shares. But that there is that charge that they leveled. I don't know if I necessarily agree that there's a whole lot of anti-intellectualism, but I do know that there's a need for us to message in a way that asks people to think through an issue. And when I was looking into that, it reminded me of something that Thomas Sowell had said, and I think this fits very well with things that we talk about on this program. I just wanted to breeze through it really quickly. I'm going to put the link in the chat. But he talks about being an undergrad at Harvard, and he's putting forth a theory on how something would work economically. And his professor asked, and then what will happen? And so Sowell went back and thought about the problem a little bit more, and he came back with the next step. And then his professor asked, and then what will happen? And he kept returning the same question throughout the whole exercise of this one theory that Sowell was expounding. And it was that moment, I guess, he felt when he realized what was going on. He had not got in the habit of thinking through the next step and the next step and the next step. And that as we tell stories about what we want conservatism to achieve and try to, I guess, recruit people to that cause, that we need to do that in our economic work, talking about economics, as well as about policy, to be able to walk people through the next step and the next step and ask them, well, what happens if this happens? What happens if that policy is passed? Because people spend a heck of a lot more time and investment making their own economic decisions than they do their political decisions. So he offered that as a way to talk to people about a huge range of issues, but making sure that we had thought through a problem, got people in the habit of thinking through a problem more. And so I thought that might be a way to counter some of the charges, whether from our side or from another side, of anti-intellectualism. Again, I don't think that's necessarily true, but I think it is a conversation we need to have.
Yeah, and it's disgusting that those sort of claims get leveled at us and are hardly ever leveled against the left, who also has their fair share of, and when I say their fair share, I mean more than that, of anti-intellectual. I mean, most of the majority, the vast majority of their arguments are emotionally based. So when we talk about anti-intellectualism, I mean, there you go. It's pretty stark, the contrast when you get into the actual issues and how deep we go into ours, how we actually have documentation, how we can back up what we're saying versus what the left does, which is basically saying, well, it makes us feel good. Andy and Corey, I saw that you were unmuted there.
Well, I'm not just against all scientific knowledge. I'm against all knowledge. I just think all of it pollutes your mind, and that's, and it hurts my head, especially when there's a lot of it in there, and that really hurts too. Now, the thing that the reason that this for me is such a joke is, as you know, I'm a former leftist, raised in leftist academia and all this.
You are an intellectual. You come from intellectuals.
Well, I come from intellectual stock, but I like to think that I broke through the gate and ran out to pasture, and now I'm not. But the thing that really, here's the biggest reason I left the left, though, is because of their lack of thinking. You know, I don't talk much about my family. I will in this moment. My family is highly intellectual. But when you're nothing, as I always say, nothing closes a mind faster than a heart. When your heart is committed to something, you will shut your mind down on it. And you will reduce your mind to being nothing more than an internal lawyer defending the choices and views that your heart has guided you to. All right? What I really began to notice when I left liberalism is that my family, when I would have discussions with them and I would start to win scientifically, like on abortion, and I mean, I would really start to do very well. Or when we would discuss, evolution and creation, and when I would start to show them, wait a minute, I know a lot more than you on these things, okay? A lot more. And then get into some economics, same thing. And these are people with high IQs. They would start to do the same thing each time. They would shut it down and not want to talk. Now I come into conservatism, and there are people who disagree with me on things. I can talk to atheist evolutionist conservatives, and guess what? They don't shut me down. Well, none are as bad as you, JD. But no, what I mean is I know a number of them, and we can talk freely. Why? Because they don't want to control me. They don't have anything invested in controlling my views and beliefs as long as I don't control them with mine, which I don't. And so they find it an enjoyable interplay of ideas, and we can learn from each other. With the left, what I found is just the existence of my different views is a threat and an insult, and it must be stopped, and therefore they shut it down. So I guess what I'm getting to is that I found leaving the left to go to the right an immense release of intellectual energy to where I was allowed to think and allowed to expand my mind and allowed to look at issues from all kinds of different angles. And it's been freeing. I've never thought so much in my life. I love it. And to tell me that the left is more pro-science, my goodness, look at global warming, it's an insult. It's not just an insult to me, it's an insult to reality.
Right. Well, how do we counter the conventional wisdom, though? Because and I'm with you, Andy. I've experienced the same thing. Just in fact, recently this week there was, some silly little meme that turned into 100 comments about pro-abortion and anti-abortion, and I just sat back and watched it, and the anti-abortion arguments were fact-based and science-based and trying to persuade rather than mandate or dictate, trying to win hearts and that kind of thing. And the pro-choicers, they kept complaining that the right was all about shoving their religion in their faces, and they're the only ones in the whole comment thread that were really even mentioning religion. So, I mean, they toss out this stuff because they are so firmly convinced that the right is all about anti-science and hates facts and is all about forcing their religion down anyone, and they will proclaim that to be the case even when it's very clearly not. And the conventional wisdom out there, even among people who are not political at all, is that the right it's the religious right, and we all want to put God in everybody's face, and we're all going to be all Jesus up in your house, and that we don't believe in science at all, and that's why we're against global warming, is because the planet's only 6,000 years old and whatever, because we prefer oil derricks or something. I don't even know what they think our logic is. They think we don't have any. How do we counter the conventional wisdom that is so strong?
Well, before you get into that, I want to make a distinction here. I think we have two challenges. One is the personal, the interpersonal, and one is the PR campaign. So I want to look at them through both lenses, because what we do on an interpersonal